Welcome to Screen Crush, I'm Ryan Airy, and this is all of the Easter eggs, references, and little things that you might have missed in James Gunn's The Suicide Squad. I am so excited to talk about this movie. I hope you guys enjoyed it. It's so much fun, and we have a lot to break down. The movie opens with the opening and title track from Johnny Cash's classic album, Folsom Prison Blues. Now, like all the song choices in the movie, this has a few layers. Yes, it's a song about prison and we're in a prison, but Johnny Cash actually performed this album at Folsom. He was a prison to these dregs of society, a voice for the powerless. And the Suicide Squad is all about people who are powerless. Just like in the first movie, the theme here is about control. Waller controls Task Force X. Starro mind controls people. Starro is controlled by the Thinker, who's under the control of a government whose people are also fighting for control. Ratcatcher 2 is an interesting addition because it's less that she controls the rats and more like she commands their loyalty. And this is important to remember for later on. So Johnny Cash is a voice of the people who are being kept down by the Man, and Amanda Waller is the Man. Her name, Waller, just like her nickname in the comics, The Wall, even implies that she's keeping the squad pinned in and under her control. So we open on Savant, a third-tier Batman villain and false protagonist. The movie lets us think that he's our POV character before pulling a bait and switch later on. This movie does such a great job of slowly introducing the characters. The first Suicide Squad used text on screen and long flashbacks, while this movie is just much more efficient. We see the government workers taking their bets on them.
Brian Derlin, he's an expert in weapons and hand-to-hand combat.
Yeah, well, I'm putting 20 on him, but he's gonna bite it.
Which lets us know who they are and that they're expendable. Savant and all the other prisoners are wearing Crocs, which I think is a nod to Killer Croc from the comics and the last movie.
I live underground. Y'all are just tourists.
The doctor who implants Savant's neck charge is played by the John Ostrander, who created the modern version of the Suicide Squad in the 80s. James Gunn has even said that this movie is kind of a spiritual continuation of Ostrander's run. If that's true though, then where's Bronze Tiger, James? Huh? Why'd you kill Captain Boomerang? Nah, he's not dead. Boomerangs, they always come back. So let's quickly run down the other DC villains we see in the movie, not focusing on them too much because, well... One thing I loved about the Suicide Squad is that it uses its R rating to give us totally gory, over-the-top action. And there's a huge fan base for mature superhero content like this movie, The Boys, and Deadpool. And after watching the Suicide Squad, I thought, man, I'm really in the mood to go watch Deadpool. But unlike all the other Fox X-Men movies, Deadpool is not on Disney Plus or on Netflix in America. But Deadpool is on Netflix in the UK. So instead of pretending I got that Bezos money and booking a flight to space and then down to the UK, I got NordVPN, the sponsor of this video. Nord has thousands of super fast servers all over the world, so you're able to register your IP address from another country, where you can watch hundreds of new titles on Netflix all around the world. It's like adding free streaming sites on top of your Netflix subscription. And if you have Disney Plus, this also gives you access to Star, where you can view mature content and major Fox franchises like Alien, Die Hard, or Planet of the Apes. In fact, you get so many new options, you can probably cancel one of your other streaming services and the VPN pays for itself. So if you're interested, go to nordvpn.com/screencrush to get a huge discount off a 2-year plan and get 4 additional months for free. And if you find out the service isn't right for you, no pressure, there's a risk-free 30-day money-back guarantee. So again, visit nordvpn.com/screencrush to get your discount and 4 months for free. Blackguard is a Booster Gold villain and squad member in the comics, and I still can't believe we're getting our 9th Batman movie before we get a single movie about Booster Gold, a time-traveling social media star from the future. Mongal is an alien warlord first met by Superman, whose brother kills her. Javelin actually did die in the comics on an early Suicide Squad mission, and this is the Batman villain Calendar Man, who's played by James Gunn, who also did the mocap for Weasel. The person next to him is Double Down, a second-tier Flash villain with evil playing cards seared into his flesh. King Shark was voiced by Sylvester Stallone, and Polka Dot Man, well, he throws polka dots. And the great Clone Wars voiceover actor D. Bradley Baker plays Sebastian the Rat.
Quiet for now, sir.
So TDK, played by Nathan Fillion, is a new villain created just for the movie. And I love that he's drinking a Dr. Pepper knockoff Mr. Pibb, when he is also a knockoff villain. Briscoe is also the Suicide Squad's pilot in the comics, and this guy, John Economos, is the warden of Belle Reve in the books. And the woman who hits Waller and takes charge is Flo Crawley. In the comics, her death actually causes Waller to soften a bit and rethink her hardline stance. The scene where the squad walk in front of the American flag calls back to the opening of the movie Patton, where the general gives a speech to the troops that kind of outlines his worldview.
We're not just going to shoot the bastards. We're going to cut out their living guts and use them to grease the treads of our tanks.
Patton's speech is actually deeply ironic, as the movie shows that his view of the perfect American soldier is clouded by his own ego, for instance when he forces a shell-shocked trooper to go into battle.
You're going back to the front, my friend. Either that or I'm going to stand you up in front of a firing squad.
This is similar to how the Suicide Squad, in particular Savant, are forced into service by the US government. The large flag also shows the government bearing down on them. And as we learn later, their mission isn't to save the world, it's to save the image of America. Harley's jacket says, "Live fast, die clown," and it's a stark contrast to her jacket in the first movie, which read "Property of Joker." So this is a nice visual indication of the events that we saw in Birds of Prey, and the fantabulous emancipation of one Harley Quinn.
Gave me the space to really reflect on the mistakes of my past.
So this introduction to the fake squad is better written than the first movie's introduction to its real squad. We get some fun banter.
Your name is Letters?
All names are letters, dickhead.
And then we get to immediately see them in action, whereas the first movie constantly explained to us that they were badasses.
This is Katana. She's got my back. She can cut all you in half with one sword stroke, just like mowing the lawn.
This movie actually shows us. So Blackguard betrays the team, which also calls back to the many Suicide Squad members who turned on the team during missions. Seriously, it was like every other mission in the comics. When we meet Bloodsport, Walker says that he put Superman in the ICU with a kryptonite bullet. King Shark is pretending to read a book called The Varieties of Religious Experience by William James. Now in this book, James examines the impact of religious experiences through individuals, not the institutions that actually house those religions. In the Suicide Squad, we see the characters' experiences through this same lens. Bloodsport has a spiritual awakening, not by serving the institution, but by believing in the individuals around him. So the country this is set in, Corto Maltese, has a dark history in the comics. In the truly excellent limited series Batman: The Dark Knight Returns, the president asks Superman to intervene against the communist rebels in this country, and he does. After he does, the Soviet Union retaliates with a nuclear strike against Superman. Graham Roger on Twitter reminded me that Corto Maltese is also referenced in Tim Burton's Batman as a location where Vicky Vale took photos.
I've seen your photographs from Corto Maltese, haven't I?
Right.
The fortress, Jotunheim, is also taken from the Suicide Squad comics. In the books, it's also a Nazi fortress, but it's been taken over by a terrorist group called the Jihad. It's the site of the Suicide Squad's first official mission in the 80s run. Starro the Conqueror is a Justice League villain from the comics. In fact, he was the first villain that the League ever fought together. Fun fact, Starro and the World War II Suicide Squad debuted in the comic The Brave and the Bold just a couple issues away from each other. So the Thinker was also a member of the Suicide Squad, though that was actually the second Thinker, a guy with mind control powers and a sweet-ass mullet. Peacemaker was not a member of the early Suicide Squad, but he was a member of Checkmate, the other team under the umbrella of Task Force X. And John Cena was one of the big standouts of this movie.
Starfish is a slang term for a butthole. Think there's any connection?
No.
So again, the exposition of this film is done way better than in part 1. Instead of keeping the villains and the audience in dark about who they're actually after, the squad gets most of the information up front, so we can take notes along with John Cena. Then we get to see them in action early when they take down the village of rebels. This is actually my favorite action sequence in the DCEU. It not only shows us their powers, but we also get a handle on their personalities and how they interact as a team. So Harley goes on her own little side adventure where she's courted like Evita.
So if you're lonely.
This is another of the movie's well-placed needle drops, but notice, nearly every needle drop in the movie becomes diegetic, music that the characters can hear in the scene. This is because the music is showing us how the characters are feeling in that moment. In the last movie, the needle drops were there to tell the audience how we should feel.
Please allow me to introduce myself.
So you probably noticed that there's a lot of bird symbolism in the movie.
Bird.
Savant begins the film by killing a bird, and later he's eaten by one. Harley is taken in by Herrera's birds, which the general later burns in their cage. This is because birds have a symbolic meaning. They can represent the freedom of nature, as in free as a bird. But caged birds have a tradition of being expendable, like the canary in a coal mine that miners would use to determine if they had struck toxic fumes. These expendable birds wither in captivity, so Savant kills the bird in his cell, but the free bird later on eats him. It also speaks to the movie's theme of control and eat or be eaten philosophy. This is also symbolized by King Shark's friends turning on him later on. So it's appropriate that in Harley's escape sequence, she sees animated birds. This needle drop isn't diegetic, it's coming from her mind. She's the only character in the movie who sings. So this music and the animated birds and flowers are an outward expression of how she sees the world. In her mind, she's always free, probably because she's finally dumped Joker in Birds of Prey.
We broke up.
And I'm glad that she's used that experience to really get to know her own bad habits and improve herself as a person.
The next time I got a boyfriend, I'd be on the lookout for red flags, and if I saw any, I would do the healthy thing.
Speaking of flags, Colonel Flag is wearing a yellow shirt just like he always does in the comics. This shirt is my favorite Easter egg in the movie because it's kind of a middle finger to Disney. It depicts a rabbit with a WB shirt and a cape holding up a sign. The WB stands for Warner Brothers, the rabbit represents Bugs Bunny, who is owned by Warner Brothers, and the cape represents either Superman or James Gunn's horror movie that he produced, Brightburn. So the sign in English reads, "Obstacles are opportunities." If you remember, Disney unjustly, temporarily fired James Gunn over some old, unfunny, gross tweets. This sabbatical from Marvel allowed him to make the Suicide Squad. They call Polka Dot Man Norman Bates, a reference to the villain in Psycho who also had a mother obsession.
Well, a boy's best friend is his mother.
He mentions that his mom worked at Star Labs, which of course we saw in Justice League, Batman vs. Superman, and in just about every episode of The Flash. Waller says that she's going to play golf with Senator Cray. In the comics, he was a corrupt politician who threatened to expose the squad if they didn't help rig an election for him. And later, he was killed by Deadshot, and actually his son Adam became a member of the team. The bus is painted in Bloodsport's color scheme from the comics. Could be a coincidence, or an indication that he is slowly assuming leadership of the team and has become their driving force. He and Ratcatcher 2 bond over being daughters and fathers.
I'm gonna get you out of here alive.
I'm going to get you out of here alive.
So the movie's theme of control doesn't quite extend to Ratcatcher 2. She doesn't intimidate, she persuades, as shown with King Shark.
Friends.
So the team actually bonds at the bar a little bit, just like they did in the first Suicide Squad, and actually like they did in Guardians of the Galaxy.
What do you expect us to do while we wait?
Speaking of Guardians, did you notice that this dancer is played by Pom Klementieff, Mantis in the MCU? When they enter the bar, we see a cameo by Lloyd Kaufman, the legendary Troma director who was James Gunn's mentor. Troma Studios is another one of society's outcasts, just like the Suicide Squad. And their seminal film, The Toxic Avenger, is actually listed in the credits, but I'm not sure where it appears in the movie. Let me know in the comments if you spotted it. I loved Idris Elba's bad American accent.
Hey, calm down!
Since we all know the man doesn't mean Baltimore dialect.
It ain't enough that I gotta be the one thinking this whole shit through.
Flag actually ends up dying at Jotunheim just like he does in the comics. But this actor, Joel Kinnaman, is in a show called For All Mankind. It's the best show on TV, and it deserves more attention. Check it out. And by the way, Harley escapes using the same circus silk skills that she was practicing in the first Suicide Squad. During the attack, Polka Dot Man is freaked out by the death of what's-his-name?
They killed Milton! Milton was still with us?
Now, this is a funny gag, but it also serves a larger purpose. We don't care about Milton, he's just a guy who was there. In our minds, he's expendable, just like Waller sees the squad as expendable. But just as people need to learn to see prisoners as human beings, the audience is forced to see Milton as a real person. You know, he had a name.
His name is Robert Paulson.
So this theme of the value of outcasts in the underclass is best expressed by Academy Award winner Taika Waititi.
Rats are the lowliest and most despised of all creatures, my love. If they have purpose, so do we all.
And quick shout out to the best actor in the DCEU, Viola Davis. Not many people know this, but a different actress was originally cast to play Amanda Waller. Do you have any idea who it is?
It's your mom!
And I mean, just, man, only James Gunn can show you an army of rats eating a starfish from space and make you cry. In the first post-credits scene, we see Weasel, very similar to a werewolf, being resurrected under a full moon.
Yo, they sent me into a werewolf? Yo, let me out!
The post-credits scene of Peacemaker sets up his HBO Max series, which now I am extremely excited for. But what did you think of the movie? Let me know in the comments or at me on Twitter. And if it's your first time here, please subscribe. For Screen Crush, I'm Ryan Airy.